This is Lakea, the librarian at the Vault of Nightmares. Your vault keeper is currently tied up right now, so I will be your host this evening. Hope you enjoy.
Portal people. Have you ever had that feeling like something was following you? And sometimes when you turn around to look, you might catch a fleeting glimpse of a shadow or a mist as it dissipates. Well, I had that happen to me every day over the span of 15 years after I unknowingly left a portal open. When I was about 13 years old, I met a girl that was 15. Her name was Christy. She was a new neighbor that lived 2 houses up from me on my street. After she moved in, she saw me playing one day outside on the sidewalk with my chalk, and she walked over to say hello. Over the span of that week, we became very good friends. We met each other every day in front of the house that was placed between both of our houses. It was actually the landlord's house for both of our parents. After getting to know each other and meeting each other's parents, we became inseparable. This was our routine every day for the first half of summer. Christy would always tell me that she loved hanging out with me, even though I was younger than her, because I acted a lot older than I actually was. Her birthday was approaching, and her parents had planned a small party at their house for Christy. I was the only friend that came to her party. The rest were her family members. One of her aunts had just came back from a vacation after visiting New Orleans. Her gift to Christy had been several board games. I thought my gift was better. I had gotten her a silver charm friendship bracelet. That evening after the party was over, me and Christy took all of her games in a blanket into the backyard. We played Battleship and Clue. When we opened the third game box, we realized it was a Ouija board. We sat staring at it for a moment, and then Christy pulled it out of the box. We sat facing each other on the blanket, with the board between us. The sun was starting to lower on the horizon at this point, so everything had shades of pinks, purples, and oranges. The air was hot and humid, and fireflies were starting to flitter about. Christy placed the board between us on the blanket, with the planchette sitting in the middle of the board. I asked her what were we supposed to do with it. She said she had only seen a board like this one other time, and that was when her parents had a party one night and her mom and her mom's friends played the game. Christy then told me that what she had seen the women do. Each woman placed a finger or two on the planchette while sitting around the Ouija board in a circle. So Christy placed her first fingers of each hand on one side of the planchette, and I placed my 2 pointer fingers on the other side. Then I asked her, "Now what?" She said that we were supposed to ask it a question out loud, and that it was supposed to answer us back. We talked for a few seconds about who was going to go first. Since it was Christy's birthday, I told her she should go first. Very quietly, to where the sound of her voice was almost drowned out by the evening bugs flying about, she asked, "Was anyone here?" We sat perfectly still for about a minute, and nothing happened. Looking a little disappointed, she looked up at me and told me it was my turn. I already knew what my question was going to be, so there was no need for me to think about it. I blurted it out with a shaky voice, since I was starting to get a creepy feeling, even though nothing had happened yet. "Are you good or bad?" I asked. As soon as I said those 5 words, I felt a tingling sensation in my 2 fingertips. I jerked my head up and looked at Christy, wondering if she was feeling the same sensation as I was. And she was staring back at me with her eyes so wide that it made her face seem distorted momentarily. And as fast as the tingling in the fingertips happened, it quit just as fast. The next question fell to Christy. Her train of thought was that since I had gotten something to happen, even if it was something small, I was still on to something. So she took my question and reworded it, so it sounded more adultish, if you want to call it that. "Are you evil?" Christy asked. That got a response. The planchette started vibrating beneath our fingers. I snatched my hands back and it stopped. I looked at my friend and told her what she was doing was not funny and that it was freaking me out. She swore that it wasn't her making it move, and that she had felt the tingles just like I had. and no one can make you feel tingles on your fingers without touching you themselves. Christy then told me that I was safe, that the house was right there where our parents could see us, and nothing bad was going to happen. At that time, she didn't know how wrong she would be. Christy asked me to replace my fingers, and trusting my friend, I did. She told me it was my turn again to ask the next question, and I immediately shook my head no. So, she continued asking the questions. She asked 3 or 4 random questions, and nothing happened. Then on about the 5th question, she asked, "If anyone is here, what is your name?" Slowly under our fingertips, the planchette began to move. It literally moved. We both gasped, but fear of not knowing the answer kept our fingers firmly planted on the planchette. First, it slowly, and I mean very slowly, moved to the letter E. Then a bit faster to the letter V. Then again to the letter I. And then it zipped to the letter L so fast. As the planchette landed over the letter L, a breeze began to blow. The wind seemed to only be blowing as if it was in a circle right where we sat. No leaves in the trees moved. They were dead still. No flowers waved back and forth in the breeze. They and every other plant remained motionless. I looked at my friend, and she at me. By the time that wind started to blow around us, we were up off the ground, grabbing our stuff and heading for the house as fast as we could. When we got inside, Christy immediately dumped the Ouija board, planchette, and box in her trash can. We stayed up all that night, too afraid to sleep, and too excited at the same time, trying to figure out how that happened, and who was that, or what was that caused the planchette to move. It wasn't until that conversation that we actually realized that it had spelled out evil. Over the next few days, our conversations always went back to that day. Even though we were afraid, we were also very curious. I noticed that my friend Christy was starting to act a little standoffish. I didn't think too much on it though. I do remember there being several times at night, or when I was alone, that I always felt like I was being watched. I started to see things out the corners of my eyes, shapes, mist, and as soon as I would turn to look at them straight on, they would disappear. I confessed this to my friend after a while. I figured she would just laugh it off and tell me I was being silly. But that wasn't the case. She confessed to me that she had been feeling the same way. She told me about how one night she was seeing something near her window, and the room grew ice cold. So she thought her window was open, and when she got up out of bed to close it, she realized it was already closed. Then as she was turning back to her bed, something grabbed her arm. She told me she looked down and seen a solid black arm and hand gripping her lower arm a few inches above her wrist. She said she ran to her parents' bedroom crying and had told her mom everything. Her mom asked her what did she do with the game, and Christy had explained to her how we had ran inside and she had thrown it away. Christy said her mother sat her down and explained to her that Ouija boards were not just a game. They could also be used as a portal, and that it takes a person with some type of abilities to activate it, even if the person themselves didn't know they had special abilities. Once activated, though, and used properly by a person with experience, it must also then be closed by the person that activated it. Christy said her mother had been trying to reach the aunt that had given Christy the game for her birthday, so they could figure out a way to close the portal without actually having the portal, meaning the board, to use. They had yet to hear back from the aunt by the time me and Christy had this conversation. Things started getting worse and the days rolled into weeks. Shadows grew darker as they appeared, as if they were growing and gaining strength. It had gotten so bad that we could actually hear footsteps behind us sometimes when we were walking up and down the street or in our houses. The turning point was when Christy became withdrawn from everything and everyone, including her mother. Her parents made the decision that they were going to move. They felt like that was their only way to escape what was happening and for Christy to be able to live a normal life again. So one evening I found myself standing on Christy's porch, hugging her and telling her goodbye. My new friend didn't even make it through the summer with me. We swore to each other that we would write letters and send gifts back and forth through the mail. I made sure before they pulled out of the driveway that she was positive she had my address. 2 weeks went by and it was almost time for school to start again. I was still seeing and hearing things. The shadows now looked like people, but completely black. There were so many of them that I always felt them around. I tried to ignore them as best as I could. I had even tried to tell my mom about what was going on, but she wouldn't listen to me. She told me that I wasn't a child anymore and that I needed to stop playing with imaginary people and making up stories. So I gave up trying to tell her. A letter finally arrived the week before school started from Christy. She told me that as soon as they left, her problem stopped. She no longer seen anything, and for that matter, she no longer felt being followed or watched. Even though I was happy for her, and in her letter you could tell the old Christy was back, I was unnerved because I was still having them happen to me. In the last paragraph of Christy's letter, her mother had written me a special message. She told me that she had finally reached the aunt that had given Christy the board, and that the aunt had informed her that since Christy no longer had any strange occurrences, that I must have been the one that opened the portal with my questions. And because the board and the planchette, along with the box, were long gone in the trash, she had no idea of how I would be able to close the portal. As long as the portal remains open, shadows, ghosts, spirits would be able to cross over through me.